Welcome to the Casual Shooters Podcast, your premier podcast for the casual shooter. I'm your host, David Riddle. My guest this week comes from the great white north of Pennsylvania. He's a new GM, newish, newer, whatever you want to say it, in production, and he's also a podcast host. So if you would, join me in welcoming to the show, Mr. Josh Morgan. How you doing, Josh?
Good, Dave. Thanks for having me on tonight. I appreciate it. It's a great opportunity.
Oh, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Lots to catch up on here, but what I like to do first, Josh, is hit you with all the hard questions right up front, get the hard drive spinning, make you sweat a little bit, and then the rest of the conversation goes easy.
Sounds good.
All right, question number one. Going back to when you got into the shooting sports and thinking like Neo of the Matrix, if there was one skill you could learn instantly, what would it be?
One skill to learn instantly. It'd have to be shot calling. I think would be like the one mechanical skill that would have made such a massive impact earlier on in my career.
So did it take you a while to kind of master that?
Yeah, so it took me a while to even be introduced to what it is. Like the thought of telling where my rounds are going based on my sights was like very, very foreign for a very long time. And then once I had it explained to me and like I knew what I was looking for in training, it came fairly easily. But I spent a lot of time not even being aware it was a skill that existed.
Oh, we'll have to come back to that. That's an interesting one. Okay. Number two kind of goes along with number one in a way. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Ooh, if any superpower, probably flying. If I could fly, I could get to a lot of matches a lot cheaper.
And you wouldn't have to take off as much time because you could be there and back in a day.
Exactly.
Okay. What is a food you'll never grow tired of?
Ooh, I am a big fan of spam musubi. It's popular in Hawaii, but it's like a sushi roll with spam on top. It's phenomenal. I love it. I can't find it anywhere in Pennsylvania. It's very upsetting to me, but I'll eat that 7 days a week.
So could you go buy some fresh sushi rolls and then cut up a can of spam, put it on top and make it that way?
You know, I have done it myself, but it just doesn't come out right. I don't know. I don't know what it is. There's some sort of like glaze type thing that goes on the spam that I just don't get it right.
Oh, wow. Okay. Side note, was Hawaii the first time you had sushi?
No, my mom was born and raised there, so I grew up in a very food diverse household. Sushi wasn't uncommon growing up.
Okay. If you could have dinner with one person from any period in history, it cannot be a family member, anything like that. Who would it be?
One person in history. I would have to say probably Thomas Jefferson because I was very interested in sort of his role in the founding of the country, but there's a lot of things that I'd like to hear his perspective on being an important person at the time, but his role not being truly appreciated until later in his career. So I think he'd be an interesting guy to sort of hear his thoughts on the founding of the country and where it is today.
I recently had someone tell me that it would be George Washington. I chose James Madison, the father of the Constitution, because like you and like him, I would be interested in picking his brain to find out exactly what they meant about certain things and what they were trying to prevent from happening.
Absolutely. There's a lot of stuff that I have questions about Why did we say certain things in specific ways, and why didn't we say certain things in specific ways? That historians and people all over the country have sort of played guessing games with, but I'd love to get that figured out
And
firsthand.
argued about. Yeah. I mean, Madison had a 4,000 book library on governments. It was amazing how many books he had. I've sat in the same room. I've been in the same room where he sat down and wrote some of this stuff out. It's pretty that man, that history is crazy because I live like an hour from Monticello, 45 to 50 minutes from Montpelier, where Madison was at, and Mount Vernon's probably an hour north. So, like, right in the middle, almost in the center of the triangle.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. If money were no object, what would you be doing right now? I know, not talking to me, but other than that.
If money were no object, man, there's few things that I love more than putting holes in paper real fast. So I'd probably still be shooting. If money was no, I'd shoot in cooler places. Like I'd travel the world for it. Um,
Okay.
and I'd shoot a whole lot more. But man, I have such a passion and such a drive in practical shooting that money no object, I'd probably be doing the same thing, just a whole lot more of it.
Okay. What's the first match that comes to mind that's international that you're like, that's the one I'm going to first?
I would love to shoot the European version of the Extreme Open. That would be
Okay.
my first one because it looks so very different than the US Extreme Open, and I'm just very interested in, like, how European shooters tackle stages, and I find it very fascinating just, like, the differences in IPSC shooters and even regionally within IPSC, like how Filipino shooters tackle stages is very different than like how Western European shooters tackle stages. And it's just like I find all of that stuff so fascinating, how different regions have developed different shooting styles that all perform at a high level.
Do you think maybe that has to do with the flavor of the matches in those different regions?
I think it probably does. And I think that's also true, like, even domestically within the US. Like, your shooting style is developed by the matches that you're engaging with on a weekly
Hmm.
or monthly basis. But it's interesting to me that it yields high level results in various places. When you look at like I'll use Graffel as the example because he is the example, right? A highly technical, highly disciplined Western European shooter, and then you look at someone like Khalil, who is just raw speed embodied, right? It's so interesting to see that both of those shooters can perform very, very well in their sports, and both of those shooters have a lot to teach in the practical shooting world. They're just very different shooting styles.
Right. I do think Christian has an opportunity to be the next Eric.
I think he's probably the only person on the planet who's got a shot at it.
Yeah. At least right now. Yes. You know, but he's getting to that point now where in US matches, doesn't matter what division it is he's shooting, he's favored to win. And I've been doing a lot of numbers crunching lately, and he's the fastest and the most accurate shooter in the majority of the matches that he shoots. So, I mean, you can't beat him when he's the fastest and the most accurate. You
Yeah,
just can't.
absolutely. And his ability to control the numbers and control his own performance, like it's very impressive.
Yes, it's very Eric-esque.
Yeah, I think if we were to look at the hit factor math side of things, and I've recently listened to your episode with Tim Herron, so I don't want to recreate that
Okay.
for you, but that episode spoke to my heart because there's not a lot of people talking about
Mm.
hit factor math. Um, in my community, I'm one of the few people talking about it, so it's so important to understand how the game is scored, and even if you can't necessarily master it in your own performance, understanding how it interacts with your score is so so important. And so to see masters of it like Graffel and like Seiler who are able to control it to a T, it's very very cool to watch once you understand the scoring behind it.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll come back to that because I do have a question about that later. So we'll get back to that. Now, those are all the hard questions. You passed. Now we're all good. Got the hard drive spinning. You're fairly young right now. You're not an old guy. Did you grow up around guns or what got you into the sport?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up hunting. So a lot of work with shotguns, a lot of upland game bird hunting. I didn't have the patience to hunt deer, but grew up there. Didn't do a lot of handgun shooting. I wasn't really introduced to handguns until I was 21. Um, Went out, purchased a handgun because I figured it would be a good thing to defend myself, and realize that there's a massive, not just legal but also moral implication. Um, and so the training requirement that I put upon myself was pretty high. Did a lot of research into it. John Correa, the guy from Active
Mm,
Self Protection, he was the pillar that shaped my sort of mental process behind self defense. I realize there's no standards or par times that will create someone who's adequately prepared to defend themselves. And so, with the goal being a limitless ceiling, I sort of found competition and went into it from there.
okay. This is a very, it's funny, very similar to Brady Harden. He was an adult. It wasn't until he got his concealed carry that he started, he was like, I got to get better at shooting. And next thing you know, he's shooting competition. So very, very similar. Interesting. It's very parallel.
Yeah, it was one of those things that I vividly remember. I had just started concealed carrying. I had taken every defensive class in the USCCA curriculum. I felt like I was hot stuff behind a gun, and I was watching a defensive encounter on active self protection, and the time the defender had was like 1.3 seconds or something like that to get his draw off, and the defender lost his fight because his draw wasn't fast enough. I was like, I don't have a 1.3-second draw. Like I didn't even know human beings could get the gun out of the holster that fast at that point in my life. And so that was sort of the eye opener to be like, you don't get to pick your fight. Like you don't get to pick who you're up against. And that those variables are so extreme. The only thing you can do is be the absolute most prepared and competent you could be.
Yes. I think if you think about it too, I think the other thing you have to do is kind of pick the right time. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like you're saying, you don't get to pick your opponent. You don't get to pick the day. You don't get to pick the time of the day. They control all of that. But I think if you can delay the moment until you can guarantee you have the adequate time to get the gun out of the holster, then I think you can kind of flip the table, you know?
Oh, certainly, certainly, and John Correa preaches a lot about that too. He's an excellent resource to sort of apply the science and the data that I love about practical shooting to the self defense world, and be like, hey, there are time standards in the real world, like there are real life
Yes.
examples of why we need to be able to shoot fast and accurately.
100% agree. Do you shoot IDPA or anything like that?
I did when I first started. So I shot IDPA probably for 2 years. I made master in a handful of divisions there. I went over, shot USPSA pretty nervously because I was like, I don't know, this is a different game. Those gamers, they don't have cover positions. This hit factor thing doesn't make any sense, right? And so I went and shot that, and I was like, just raw gun handling, I'm getting gapped. Like you pick up 3 or 4
Mm.
divisions that people call you a master in, that you're the pinnacle of the people that you're shooting around, and you go and get gapped and you end up in C class, like that's a pretty that was a pretty eye-opening experience for me to be like I really don't know anything about shooting. And so to sort of restart my journey in C class in USPSA and work my way up again was a good experience for me.
I, not trying to rehash conversations myself with other guests I've had, but I mean, I feel like If I look, I love the stages in IDPA. I love the variety that you get and the different setups and the different scenarios they put you through, but they need to change their capacity because it's not realistic, and they need to change shooting on the move because that's also not realistic.
Have
What do you
you have you looked into GPA at all? The Galactic Pistol Alliance?
I have. There's only one around me and it seems to fill up pretty quick. It's about an hour north of me. So um I have considered giving that a shot. I'd be curious to see what that's like.
It's an IDPA. It started as an IDPA offshoot that's turned into its own thing, but it solves a lot of the problems that people have had with IDPA throughout the years. And so I stepped away from IDPA and went exclusively to USPSA over some of the rules discussions and things like that. The shooting and the people winning the match weren't always the best shooters. Sometimes they were the best rules arguers, and that can be true in any competition, but I just didn't personally appreciate it. And then the skill ceiling in USPSA is so much higher, and
Mhm.
the amount of lessons that you're learning in USPSA in training with the focus of a hit factor um, is so much higher. And so I think I quantify it like I learned more in 6 months in USPSA than I did in 2 years of IDPA about how to shoot fast and accurately.
Yeah, I almost feel like calling it hit factor scoring doesn't provide the correct amount of justice when it's points per second, you know?
Hmm.
I think if you use that term for people who aren't necessarily into the sport, but you explain it instead of saying, "Oh, it's hit factor scoring." I don't understand that. Oh, it's points per second. So it's all about speed and points, then it's like, "Oh, okay, now I get it?"
Absolutely. I might have to steal that, explaining it as points per second to people who may not be in the know.
Yeah, I think that's one of those ways that people would catch on. And then, you shoot a little bit, then you can like, here's what I mean, here's how you figure it out. And you're like, oh, that's it. Okay, that I think makes more sense to some people, especially new shooters.
Hmm.
Now, when you first started shooting IDPA, I assume it was with whatever your carry gun was.
Yeah, yeah. I was shooting a Glock 17 with a Mariglow night sights at that point in my life.
Okay. All right. But I mean, you got master in, like you said, several divisions. So you were able to hit what you're aiming at. So in a decent amount of time, not like you said, not in USPSA time, but that's also part of the limitations of IDPA where they make you run to a spot, stop, shoot, make you run to another spot, stop and shoot. But how did you find it? Well, all right, let me go back. With USCCA, you said you took all of their classes. I'm not familiar with their classes. So what do you mean when you say that?
Yeah, so they have their regular concealed carry home defense curriculum, which serves as an excellent introductory tool. I went through that. I then went to their regular concealed carry, like drawing from a holster class. Um, took that class, and then they have defensive pistol 1, 2, and 3. I think it's changed fairly recently to a separate defensive pistol curriculum that they've developed. Um, then and sort of changed and tweaked. But originally there were 3 levels, and so you progressed all the way up to defensive pistol 3, which was like draw and fire 6 shots at 5 yards in under 3 seconds, and like stuff like that, where there was now a time component to it. And so there was a lot of textbook work, a lot of presentation sitting in a classroom work, which is very important. Like it instilled in me a very deep appreciation for the legal ramifications of deadly force, which I don't often see in the gun community. So I'm very grateful that that was instilled in me very early in my journey. But it certainly wasn't adequate to be in line with what defensive shootings were showing that the skill sets people needed.
Okay. Because I just, while you were talking, I pulled up USCCA on the interwebs and I see there's a basic handgun. So I assume there's all of these classes you're talking about, you did in person.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. It looks like there's three: concealed carry, self and home defense, shooting class. And then there's also online training, though, too. Did
Yeah,
you
they
do
have
any of that?
they have quite a few online modules. I personally never did. Um, I don't do super great on online learning stuff. It's just not interesting to me. It takes a lot to
Yeah.
keep me engaged if I've got the distractions of all the cool stuff that I have in my house around me.
And the
Um,
internet on another tab. Yeah.
exactly, right? It's like, yeah, okay. Least legal use of deadly force. Yeah, all right. But it was very, it was very beneficial. I'm glad I went through that experience. There are some things in there that I wish I would have known, or learned along the way, but they do a phenomenal job of providing an entry level appreciation for the legal side of things.
Okay. So do you think you gained the most from that aspect, from the defensive posture side of it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, it. I would not have the appreciation I do today, for the legality, um,
Mm.
because I mean, I grew up in rural Michigan with, some fairly rough farmer folks that their use of deadly force, was more prescribed by how they feel it should be, not necessarily, how the law says it is. And so a lot of
Right.
them, if they're stealing my truck, you just go out there and hit them with the 12 gauge. It's like, all right, well, that's not in line with what the law tells us about legal use of deadly force. And so if there's no education and training to combat that, that becomes like common knowledge, and it's inaccurate. And so they do a good job with that curriculum.
You're not living in Michigan now, are you?
I am not. I moved out
Okay.
to Philadelphia. It would have been almost 6 years ago now.
They're also not very 2A friendly. I don't know if anybody told you that, Josh.
Yeah, Michigan, not anymore.
What? Philadelphia? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
didn't they just have a crazy police chief on the TV not too long ago saying crazy 2A stuff?
I'm just outside of city limits, so I don't give them too much
Okay.
credence. But that
Okay.
the city as a whole is a mess, so it wouldn't surprise me if the police chief was saying some crazy stuff too.
Yeah, she was, I believe it was a she, and I believe she was talking some craziness, but it's like, okay, whatever. I believe you're supposed to uphold whatever. It's all half of the country is crazy anyway. And it's not
Absolutely.
our half. um that was interesting there. So I guess I want to back up for a second. How and maybe I missed it. You may have said it earlier, but how exactly did you I know someone was like, "Hey, come over here and do the USPSA thing." But how exactly did you find IDPA to start your competition path?
Yeah, so the instructor that I was taking most of the USCCA courses with, when I finished Defensive Pistol 3, he was like, "Hey, I'm happy to continue to work with you in private lessons, but go shoot this IDPA thing they have down in Bridgeville, Delaware. Um, it's a $5 match. Go shoot it, and you might learn something there more than you would in a class." So I was like, at the time, I was a broke kid, working as a swim instructor. So I was like, man, $5 match. I can't get on a range for $5, let alone run around and shoot and do the reloading and all that fun stuff. So I would drive down there. It was about a hour and 45-minute drive, and I did it 6 times a week or 6 times a month. So I changed my work schedule. So I'd have my Wednesday mornings off to drive down there, and then I'd go down on the first and third Saturdays. And I did that for probably 18 months. And that club still
Wow.
has a special place in my heart. Those guys are phenomenal people, and Tons of volunteers down there, and a really great entry point for the sport.
Wow, $5 match. That's not even what is it? It's probably not five anymore.
Nope, it's 5 to this day. They run the GPA format
Wow.
now. That's the
Okay.
club that is the birthplace of GPA. Um,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
and it was Terry Stewart and Chuck Limpert are the two that founded GPA, and they were the two match directors for that IDPA club. And they put on the state match for Delaware. They were very, very active in the IDPA community, and for a number of reasons, they decided to develop GPA. But that club, to like, I don't think I'll ever have anything negative to say about it. There are some people that don't love IDPA, they don't love GPA, they don't love necessarily how that club does some things, but they are truly phenomenal people to bring new shooters into the game.
Wow. Okay. Now that's also where you guys are having a class later, right?
Yes, yeah.
Same
So we'll be
place.
down there April 12th. Myself and Dave Tatoian, he owns Double Tap Shooting Academy with me. Him and I are going to be teaching a class down there, the science of competition.
Yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit more because I'm curious, but I want to get there. You know what I mean? Now, so you started doing that. You said you shot it for 2 years, and then you did the USPSA thing. But you said, well, I did write it down, and I still almost forgot it. First off, do you ever um watch any of the Andrew Branca stuff?
I do not.
So he's very interesting because he's a lawyer. He was even on the Firearms Nations podcast. That's when I first with Ark Levy. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. I don't think he does it anymore. He was doing it when I got into shooting in 2018, but he very quickly kind of slowed down considerably, and I don't think he's done one in a few years. But Andrew Branca, he's a lawyer, and he deals exclusively with the defensive shootings. And he is at the point now where like he consults with like with the oh shoot, who was the guy in Wisconsin? Last name started with an R. Rittenhouse. Um so I believe his lawyers consulted with Andrew Branca about how to defend him. He's always putting out videos about, is this legal? Is it not? But he's actually on the Supreme Court bar. Like he's able to argue at the Supreme Court level, as well as being primarily a Second Amendment lawyer for defensive shootings. So I'm going to assume no. The answer was no. You don't.
Yeah, I've never watched. I've at least not by name. I may have seen some of his videos or things like that, but I certainly haven't seeked him out as like an individual to research.
Okay. Yeah, he's very interesting. He's got a lot of videos, and he'll talk about defensive shootings strictly from a legality standpoint. And is it legal? Is it not? What makes it legal? What makes it illegal? You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
he breaks it down. It's very, very interesting.
The world needs more of that.
Yeah, 100% for sure. So now that I remembered that and got that out of the way, the other thing I want to get to now is you said you were shooting USPSA for a few years and then learned about shot calling, but it was later in the game. When you first started shooting USPSA, did you listen to any podcasts or get classes from anybody else specifically for USPSA?
No, so I started USPSA with a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, looking back on it. Like I was as a young guy, I had been told I was good at IDPA. I was told I was good at shooting for a long time. And I showed up to USPSA and was firmly entrenched in C class for a very long time. And so it was sort of an ego thing for me to like sort of grind through that. And so I wasn't really consuming any shooting media. I wasn't listening to podcasts. I would watch a couple of YouTube videos, but it was mostly stage runs. There wasn't a lot of instructional breakdowns until I ran into a Stager video online and sort of sat down for 2 hours and watched the entirety of the class and the instructional thing. And he talks about shot calling at one point in that video, and that was like shot calling. Okay, knowing where the bullets are going, I get that, right? Like I can see the holes in the target as I'm shooting. That makes sense. And then like I'm continuing to listen to him talk about it, and it's like he's doing this at 20 yards, and I'm like, you're not seeing the hole at 20 yards. Like I'm certainly not. So how is he able to do this? And that sort of created this path down to
Mm.
figure out shot calling among a whole laundry list of other technical deficiencies that I needed to work through at that point. Um, and once I was able to understand it conceptually, like, and I was able to look for it in training, it came pretty quickly.
So once you found out what that was, and so let's just say from the point of watching that 2 hour Steger video, how long did it take you to make B class?
B class, it would have been fairly quickly. I want to say 3 or 4 months.
Okay. So
Um,
like enough time to get enough classifiers under your belt to class up.
Yeah, I actually made B class at nationals in 2023. I won C class in production. Woohoo! And that was my bump to B. So I was pretty geeked
Okay.
about that at the time.
Okay. Yeah, that's an ego boost right there, you know?
I I
That's a
was
plus.
I was fortunate that I had some friends to keep me grounded in reality, but yeah, it
Oh, I'm
felt it
sure.
felt good. It felt good to win at something that for a long time I did not think I could do. Like there was a period of time when the transition first went to USPSA that I was like, I can't shoot USPSA. Like I'm not designed for it. I can't process it. I'm not fast enough.
Oh,
Like
wow.
there was a very real like internal struggle to like figure out, do I just go back to IDPA and learn how to rules lawyer even more, or do I stick here and grind this thing out and try and be the best shooter I can be?
I'm trying to pull something up real quick. So I'm trying to see. Uh, they changed the name from handgun to factory to, you know what I mean? Like, so
Yep.
I can never remember which year is called what. Um,
It started as Iron Sight Nationals and it became Handgun Nationals. I think it was the first year L10 was provisional.
L10 or
Or not L10,
limited
Limited
optics.
Optics.
Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Let me make sure I have
Handgun
my years
national.
right.
That's okay. It doesn't matter for what I'm pulling it up for. My whole point was just I'm going to the match breakdown because they tell you how many people shooting in each division. And C class in general at Handgun Nationals, there were 86 of them. You said you shot production, right?
Yes, yeah, I was shooting production.
So you were first out of 18. That's still something to be proud of. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And looking back on it, like I'm I'm proud of what I did. It didn't mean what I thought it meant at the time, but it meant that I was on my way. It was the first time, like looking at my progression in the sport, that I was like, okay, I'm making progress. I'm able to put in the work and put in the effort to beat my peers, um, and that kicked it off.
Well, I'm going to put it in a different perspective for you. One that I think you'll appreciate. You were basically 66% of nils who won the match as a C class shooter. So I would say you definitely earned that bump. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So it wasn't just that, oh, I beat all the C class people and I got a bump. No, you got a bump to where you should be. You know, that's a more accurate representation of what you were at the time. So good on you. Good shooting.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. I'm because I'm not a huge fan of people saying, oh, and not that you did. That's not where I'm going with this, but I've seen posts like, hey, I'm ranked in the top 20 in B class, C class, whatever class. And I'm like, well, that's really not impressive. Um, but when you start looking at it in regards to like that, oh, I was C class and I got a bump. Well, yeah, you deserve that bump because that's really what I mean, your results show that's what you are and you should have been. So, yeah, good job. Keep going. You know what I mean? I think that is the motivation to get to for people to continue and become more enthralled in the sport, you know?
Oh, it worked on me. That I got a good 4 months of hardcore grinding after that for free. No motivation required.
I mean, because look, Nils is no slouch. I mean, so to be 65% of the winner of a national level match when you have Nils, JJ, Brian Giovannini, Mason Lane, Casey Reed, Tyler Turner, I can keep running down the list of names, but that is where it's like, that is a match where you're like, yeah, good job. Shooting 65% of that group of people, I think is awesome.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, I'm sure you have a different perspective now. You know what I mean?
I certainly do. I certainly do. And some of those names you read off are the guys that I'm looking to chase here in the next few years of my career. So it's a the listing off those names is kind of cool for me because like those are the people that I'm tracking scores on. Those are the people that I'm looking for stages on. I had my first ever national stage win at IPSC Nationals against Mason Lane and Sal Luna and some of the Argentinians. So, like, it was very cool to like be to look back on that and see those same names.
Yeah, and see the progress. Did you walk off the stage saying, I'm coming for you?
No, I walked off that stage. I was like, that was way too many makeups.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
Yeah, it was a stage that is fairly tight IPSC partials, and it just so happened took a little bit riskier of a plan, um,
Mm.
and I won it on points. Everybody else in the super squad was rightfully willing to take Charlie's to stay off the mics, and I was sliding them on in there.
He who dares wins. So good job. All right. So let's back up now. You saw the Ben Steger video and you're like, oh, okay. Light bulbs start coming on. You're like, oh crap, I need to do some stuff. How did that affect your training? Did you do more training? Did you change your training? Were you doing dry fire? How did all of that change at that point?
Yeah, it sort of opened my eyes to a skill set and a skill level that I didn't understand existed. And so I, for a while, my practice and my training was like stand at 20 yards. Can I shoot a group? Okay, cool. Go to 5 yards and shoot bill drills. Can I do that really fast? Okay, cool. All right, that's it for the day. Like, I can go fast and I can be accurate. Those are the two things I need to win. And so I had never really practiced anything beyond that, right? The ability to interpret sights in terms of confirmation levels, the ability to manage risk reward on targets. Those all became things that I needed to implement in my training. And so I changed how I was training. I stopped isolating super extreme ends of the spectrum. And I started working on what does my gun need to tell me is acceptable in specific scenarios. What sight picture can I get away with on this target? What sight picture can I get away with on this target at a different distance and difficulty? And then how do I manage that as a shooter? If I get away with too little, where do those rounds go? If I spend time and aim too much, what's my penalty there? And so that's sort of how my training shifted to sort of
Mm.
progress me through the game.
Now, at that point, how much did you understand hit factor or points per second?
Almost 0. I
Okay.
I knew I had to get points. I was able to look at that and say, well, if it's a 5 hit factor stage, right, 1 delta is not gonna be enough. Like, I can't shoot 2 delta on the target because that's not fast enough, or that's not enough points. And so, like, I could conceptually understand that. I did not understand anything about how stages were scored. I didn't understand a single
Mm.
thing about how matches were scored because I was an IDPA guy. I was scored in the aggregate my entire shooting
Right.
career up to that. So when I went to USPSA, the idea that stages were scored individually and match points were awarded on individual stages did not even process in my brain that that was how it was scored.
So how long did it take for you, or and I don't want to say you had to work at it, but at how long after that did you finally understand the hit factor scoring?
Yeah, it's been a slow and gradual understanding of hit factor. And there's still things that I'm learning and ways that are it's being presented that are opening my eyes to different nuances of it. But the Hit Factor podcast with Saul Allen, who goes by Potato online, he opened my eyes in in his explanations on that podcast in particular about how stages are won, how score compression works, how hit factors determine stage winners and stage winners determine match points, how points dropped impacts large things at the top of the game. And so his explanations and listening to the hit factor religiously at that point in time helped me understand a lot more of the math. And that was all right around the same time. Once I realized that there was so much more to this game than I initially expected or understood, that sort of sent me down a rabbit hole where I was watching YouTube videos from everybody I could find. I was listening to more podcasts on it, um, and sort of just consuming as much shooting media as I possibly could.
All right, I am looking up something. Um, Here it is right here. There is a 20-minute video out there from 3 years ago called Hit Factor Strategy by Eric Graffel and JJ Racaza. Have you seen that?
I have not. I love that though.
Yeah. I am going to copy this and I am going to send it to you right this very second, just so you have it.
Absolutely.
All right. It has been sent to you via Instagram. But yeah, it can be complicated, but once you get a grasp of it, like I still haven't, like I haven't really competed in years, due to some physical ailments, but knee wise, not other health, just knees. But so I haven't really been focused on the whole how am I going to win this stage, or how am I going to get my best stage time and all of that. But it's definitely, I go back to Nil saying it's not the best shooter, it's the best competitor that's going to win. And in order to be the best competitor, you have to understand that stuff.
Yep. I mean, the last 2 years, I've been super deep with the hit factor math and bringing it into my courses as an instructor and teaching it to people, um, because Tim Herons had mentioned it on his podcast with the football analogy. I liken it to playing basketball, right? If I was to teach someone how to play basketball and I said your only goal is to get the ball through the hoop, right? On a fundamental level, yes, that's correct. But if you don't know the point difference between a 3 pointer and a layup, you're not going to be able to make smart decisions. You're not going to be able to do you're not going to be able to play as effectively as someone who understands those things. And so, is the game just go faster and shoot better points? Yes, at a certain level, sure. Just in the same way basketball is get the ball through the hoop, but that's not the end of the conversation when it comes to how to play the game.
Correct. Agree. Now I've been I figured now is a good time to talk about this. As I said earlier, I've been crunching a lot of numbers. I have a spreadsheet that covers. It's already up. It's just I got to put it on the other screen. I'm going to slide it over here. There we go. Covers every single nationals from 2020 to 2025. I have hit factors broken down for every single person. And they're aggregate hit factors. I am now, after having done that, I am now a proponent. Yes, that is correct, Dave. You said it right. Of aggregate hit factor at nationals instead of stage points.
Okay.
So, and here's why, but I want to get your thoughts. I'll explain why, and then you can, feel free to say whatever you like. Because if you look at someone like a Jacob Hetherington, their stage scores are like this. I've even graphed that out for a nationals. And the winners are much more consistent. So like I went and graphed out the 2023 Carry Optics Nationals where Eric and Edsel and Martin Kamenicek were over here. So I did the top three. I did those guys and then the U.S. top three, and based it on that. And you can see how much flatter Eric's performance was, and he was still just as fast as most of them, and very accurate. But what I have found is when you score it by stages, you punish those roller coasters, those peaks and valleys. When you do an aggregate hit factor, I feel you get a better representation. You actually reward speed a little more than you do points. Because Jacob Hetherington, who in 2023, let me pull it up. I got it right here. Let me hit the tab. Oh, wait. 2024, not 2023, 2024. So Jacob was the fastest person overall. He edged Edsel Gino out by 61 100ths of a second overall as fastest. They were the only two below 300 seconds. But hit's not as good. So obviously his standing was much, much lower. For example, Eric Graffel was 308 seconds. He was, Brantley was faster. Christian Seiler and him were anybody less than a second ahead of him, I'm just going to say you're tied. So you could say Edsel and Jacob tied. And then you had Martin Kamenicek at 307, Brantley at 304, Christian Seiler at 307, JJ at 308. So you had a lot of them right through there because Eric was 308. But when you look at the overall hit factor, it actually tends to reward the speed. It gives you a little bit more in terms of speed. Let me go to last year's, was it Race Gun? No, Race Gun still for the most part, other than one person, which was nil. So I'm looking at limited. And when I did an aggregate hit factor, when I converted it to minor, so everybody'd be minor, nils actually moved up a little bit. But I found it was interesting that I like the idea now of an aggregate hit factor across the board instead of stage points, is I feel like it gives a better representation of the shooter as a whole instead of stage points. Because I feel like if it's a large field stage and let's say just someone has a malfunction, well, it wasn't anything on the shooter's part, but something happens. Now, it is still your responsibility as a shooter. But my point is that With an aggregate hit factor, it doesn't seem to hurt as much as it does in stage points. Is my point.
Yeah, I think I'd have to play around with that conceptually on how that would impact the scoring. I really enjoy the way stage points interact in the current system. The ability at the top of the game to push stage wins, to compress your competitors, to be incentivized and mandated to be consistent. I find that to be a unique and interesting challenge because there's a lot of people who can shoot at a very high level in this game. The real challenge, the real separator that I think is very, very cool for us is how do I do that every single time? How do I perform well? How do I perform technically proficient with minimal to no mistakes on every single stage, regardless of difficulty, regardless of size? How do I control myself as a competitor to do this correctly? I think that's part of what makes this sport so interesting. And I think that mandate of consistency combined with the scoring method of stage points creates a very, very cool situation for competitors. So I'd have to play around them more. I don't have any strong opinions, but I do appreciate the scenarios that we get because of our stage-based scoring method.
So here's what I'm getting at. So here's a much better example. This was last year's Race Gun Nationals. Seiler wins it regardless. However you want to total it up, Christian wins far and away because he was the fastest by 8 seconds, and he was the only one with over 80% alphas, and he had 85% alphas. So to be 8 seconds faster than everybody else and 85% alphas is ridiculous. I mean, that
Yep.
it almost makes me wonder if he submitted all the stage plans and you know what I mean? Like it was his personal match. He literally ran away with it. So I also, not only do I have everything in normal, like for race gun, major power factor scoring, I also have it in minor scoring. In minor scoring, his lead gets bigger
Hmm.
because he was fast and accurate. Because I've also found that major scoring allows for a lot of slop, a lot of slop. But just keeping with major power factor for the moment, here's the prime example. Brian Jones was seventh, okay, in the match. If you go by aggregate hit factor, he's third. So that's where I started. I was starting to see stuff like that, and I'm like, whoa, this is very interesting. Um, and I think, well, no, I mean, he only had one penalty total, so it's probably a no shoot because it wasn't a mic. Looking at my spreadsheet, it wasn't a mic. So, and his time was pretty. The guy Casey Eusebio, same time. So but he was faster than some of the people above him, but only two. So it's an interesting dichotomy here where that um let me I'm going to have to I'm going to go to another screen with you, but I've got to that screen already has something on there and I'm going to have to remove it for a moment. There we go. Now I'm going to share my spreadsheet here real quick. Oh, there we go. Let me do that. Let me kind of crop it down so I can make it bigger. But this will make a little bit more sense to you when you see it. Can you see that?
Oh yeah.
So let me move my cursor over here so we can see it. But this is what I'm saying. So these are all the alphas, the Charlies, the deltas. So the penalties are mics and no shoots combined. So for Brian Jones, he doesn't have any mics, but he's got a penalty. So that means he's got a no shoot. Whereas June Kim has 5 mics and 3 no shoots. So it's a total of 8. So there's the time, there's all the points, and there's the hit factor. So he's got an 8.542 aggregate for the entire match. So that would actually put him right behind John.
Yeah, I'm curious how that would play out amongst competitors if every stage is weighed equally and there's every single time penalty is added the same and every single point penalty is added the same. I don't know. It would be an interesting. It's interesting to see. Like it's a very cool stat line to have to see how our stage by stage scoring method impacts people. I'd have to play around with it. It's an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I wasn't doing this to see. I was just trying to come up with, okay, who are the top 10 shooters in each division for this decade so far? So I just used all the top 10 fine or finishers in each nationals. That's what I used as my basis. And then I started running into stuff like this and I'm like, wait a minute. What in the world? So then I started going back and looking at different. I'm like, whoa. And then the other thing I was like, that's where I found too when I started converting. I mean, I already had an idea that major power factor allowed for slop, but when I started converting all of them, every major power factor score since 2020, I've converted into minor power factor scoring. And sure enough, it shows every single time that it's slop. But the one person who doesn't shoot sloppy is Christian. And his win last year went from basically half of a hit factor to 8/10 of a hit factor when you convert it to minor. So I think that also really that I think actually rewards his time and accuracy more than major power factor does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think any shooter, regardless of power factor or division, if you have the ability to control yourself at that level, if you have the ability to express such a high level of technical skill so consistently that it's a guaranteed high level performance, um, you're going to score well. I think a lot of that major power factor slop, which I think is a good term to call it, I'll stick with that. Um, Comes from how that how those divisions are scored, right? So I think it's sloppy because it allows for that. The risk reward allows that to be acceptable when they're looking at how their hit factors are going to play out.
Yeah, I agree. And my not so lately I've been on this diatribe of I'm not saying do away with major power factor, but I would like to see a whole year where maybe you run major and minor concurrently in every match just to get an idea. Because my issue is this: if you look at it historically, it came about when you had everybody shooting one division and you had people shooting all these different calibers. So to make it fair, like, okay, if you're shooting a 45 or, something major power factor, well, you're going to get an extra point here and an extra point there because you're having to deal with greater recoil and whatnot. Well, now, I mean, that's not really the situation. You've got 9 divisions. So you're just competing against people in your division only. You're not having to deal with or shoot against other people. And I think if you look at um, like limited, where now you've had minor power factor guys winning major power factor divisions, do we really need major power factor scoring? Do we need major scoring anymore? I think that's something that they should look at and debate. You know, put it to the competition committee and let them do an in earnest review historically, what's going on currently, and future. You know,
Oh yeah. I think it's certainly interesting. I think the major power factor and the ability to earn additional points for that trade-off in capacity and recoil and things like that is an interesting situation. World Shoot single stack results, or sorry, World Shoot classic results for our IPSC enjoyers, um, were very interesting. That the Americans were the only ones shooting major. Um, that's interesting to me. Like I find that super cool. Like the Americans chose that for a specific reason for that match. And the other international competitors who are also doing this at a high level didn't come to that same conclusion. I think that creates some interesting scoring situations, and I think it creates some interesting decisions that those competitors have to make on each stage. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the more layers that a competitor has to work through to create a high level performance, it makes it more interesting.
I had one of those guys on. I was telling you about the international shooter. I had one of the international classic division world shoot people on my podcast, which is coming up. Um, Thomas Luzuriaga from the Philippines. That's the guy I was talking about. And I asked him, I was like, so I mentioned Tim Herron and how Tim said he wished he had shot major power factor there. I asked Thomas, and Thomas agreed. He's like, yeah, that match would be good for major power factor. So I asked him, I was like, would you consider major power factor at one of those? And he said, no, I'll always just shoot 9. It's like, okay, interesting. But it is another layer, like you said, what do you want to do? This or you want to do that? So I do think that's interesting. I just think from, USPSA does things a little different, like the equipment stuff and things like that. They do different, you get more freedom on a stage where you can run outside of the fault lines, things like that. So you could still have our own certain rules if we wanted,
Sounds like that's
in
changing.
that
Sounds
regard.
like the fault line rule might be going away here shortly.
Really?
They just in the March updates they expanded the level 1 exception for shooters must remain inside the fault lines. I think it's like 1155. They extended that to all levels have the ability to restrict shooters to only being inside the shooting area.
Oh, you mean in the written stage brief?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's not a you have to, but if the stage designer puts it in the written stage brief, then I think that, but I like that because I like stage designers to be able to design a stage and go, oh, this is what I want them to do. And I want to test certain things. Well, man, there's always somebody that's going to find a way around what you're trying to test.
Yep.
So, which is also very unique to USPSA, but I like that they have the option. I wouldn't want it to be all of them. I
Mhm.
wouldn't want to go to a 20-24 stage match and every single one of them be like that. But I like the idea of maybe half of them are, you know, because I think the other part of that too, Josh, is now I think it really starts testing physical athleticism too. Whereas in USPSA, you might be able to find a shortcut to get to a shooting point. But with IPSC now, it's like everybody's having to run basically the same stage, the same plan. So now physicality matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think in the shooting sports physicality, as I go on my own journey and starting to work on the physical fitness side of things, like the physicality of it, I think is underappreciated for a lot of people,
Yes.
and it's
Yes.
it's not necessarily the most important skill by a large margin, but if it's
No.
10% of the game, 10%'s a lot at the top of the pack, right? So, even if it's 5% of the game at the top of the pack, a free 5% just for being physically aggressive, for having the ability to move quickly through a stage, like that's huge.
Josh, when I was mentioning all those names, let me go back here. Production. Nils, JJ, Brian Giovannini, Mason Lane, Casey Reed, Tyler Turner, Phil Strader, Stephen Lutman, Austin Hall, John Treat. Go to any other, division you want. There's a long list of names. But at some point in there, maybe the top 5, top 6, top 7, top 8, whatever it is, they're all very close shooting skills and everything else. So now you have 2 factors involved: physicality and mental aspect of the game. Those are going to be the deciding factors because they can all hit all the targets. That's not an issue. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So now at the top of that list, maybe it's not as critical, in A, B, and C, more in A, little less in B, less in C, even more less in D. You know what I mean? The further down you go, the less it matters. But the higher you go, it just like the mental preparedness, that matters more and more the higher up the rung you go.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And that's something that I'm seeing in my own training now. Um, we mentioned it earlier. I recently made GM. I have a great training partner in Dave Tatoian, who's a carry optics and a limited optics G, and him and I shoot together weekly, and we'll run a
Mm.
stage and we'll set something up to practice, and I might be a second behind or a second and a half behind with a dot when I choose to cheat, and we'll break it down and sure, like he'll close a gap in 3 seconds that takes me 3.7. And it's like, well, there it is. Like
Mm.
you do that twice in a stage, right? Now he's a fundamentally phenomenal shooter. He's a great guy, and so he's able to do other small things. But there is a large chunk of time that sits between him and I in pure physical speed.
Which kind of surprises me that people don't work out more. And I don't mean like, if you're happy being an A class of, you know what I mean? Like there's different levels to this game too of what people want to accomplish. If you're not trying to win an area match or a nationals or whatever, okay, I get why you wouldn't. You might still go to the gym and work out, but you're not doing things specific for USPSA. You're just maintaining overall total fitness, that type of thing. But when you're when you're in that top, 15 or 20 at nationals, and if you want to be number 1, I think there are different aspects of your game now you have to work on. Your mental approach to it, your physicality of that. There's just so much. There are other things you have to focus on as well as just maintain your skills and get better at understanding what you're doing.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I love about practical shooting that I don't think exists in a lot of other. I don't want to call them hobbies necessarily because this is a sport to a lot of people, myself included. But in a
Right.
lot of adult sports, right, there you can be super fast and be a good runner, right? But to be a good shooter, there's a physical requirement, there is a mental requirement, there is a math component, there is the ability to problem solve quickly, right? Um, there's the ability to face pressure, right? Not just necessarily like amongst people and your own expectations, but pressure on a stage competing against someone you're trying to beat or somebody who's trying to beat you. Like, um, there's all of that stuff, and I think that's part of what makes this game so addicting and part of what I love about it. There's just so many things that you need to work on simultaneously to do it well, and there's so many things beyond just the putting holes in paper that I love so much.
There really is. There's a lot of it. And it's even if you look at other shooting sports, then there are things that transfer from one shooting sport to the next. The mental aspect of the game, things like that, your preparedness. And I was about to say something else because that you had mentioned and it slipped my mind. I'm sure it'll come to me and be like, "Oh, now I remember." But yeah, I know what it was. Sport or hobby. I think it really depends on the individual perspective.
Mhm.
When I had time now, Thomas's will air before this, so I can say this, and people are like, "Oh, we already heard him say that." But I mean, he was 7th in the world in classic, and he's the most casual shooter I've ever met who's top 10 in the world. Like that guy hasn't shot a gun in 3 months. And he's not going to focus much on shooting this year. He said, "Oh, I'll ramp it up in 2028 so I'll be ready for 2029." I'm like, "What?" You know what I mean? Like it's perspective. He's like, "Look, I'm not he's in art. He's into art." So he's like an art consultant guy. It's like, "What?" Totally completely outside of the field, not a gun guy, nothing. Just has a unique ability to do what he does, you know? But to him it's a sport, but it isn't like serious sport to him, you know? It's almost like half sport, half hobby, you
That
know?
makes me so angry, Dave. That makes me so angry. I
It's
hate that.
crazy, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
crazy.
I wish I had that ability to take it
Well, we all
so
do.
casually and perform at such a high level. But
He in the conversation he even says, "Yeah, I'm a casual shooter." I was like, I'm like Thomas, you're the highest level casual shooter I've ever met in my life. That's what I said. I'm like this is crazy. But yeah, I mean, he is living proof that some people have an innate ability to do certain things, and he has it.
yeah, I think there's probably something else there. Whether it's a discipline that he's incredibly self-disciplined in other areas of his life, or he's incredibly um, prone to like problem solving and analytics. That the mental side of it, of understanding what he's doing when he's shooting, and the ability to hold himself to specific things while he's shooting, probably plays a large role there. Because at a certain point, the shooting skill becomes secondary to your ability to execute on it and to hold yourself accountable to your pre-planned confirmation levels. And so I think that's probably there's something there. I'll have to listen to the episode. I'll be excited to hear it after all of this is aired.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a fascinating conversation with him. Any plans on shooting dots, or do you just want to stay in irons for now?
So I had some haters who were telling me I was hiding in my iron sighted division. And so I was on a dot for a little bit. These like past 3 or 4 months. So I shot Maryland State Championship with a dot. I shot 90% of Dave Tatoian, who ended up winning that match. So I was pretty happy with
Okay.
that. Just picking up a dot 3 weeks prior and then walking out there, and then going to US Extreme. I shot a dot. I think I was like 77 or 78% of Grafel. So I was like, okay, the things that I'm working on, like they're translating. The skill sets, the ability to shot call, the ability to gun handle correctly, stage plan, all that kind of stuff. Like that's transitioning between platforms, which is what I'm looking to do. All the great shooters in the world can pick up any single gun in any single division and go out and be competitive. There is something that is inherent to being a good shooter that is regardless of division. Good shooters are good shooters regardless of what gun they have in their hands, and that's what I'm looking to do. So, kind of prove that to myself that like the things that I'm doing are working. I can translate this to a dot if I need to. And now I'm back shooting actually a little bit of limited to play around with some major power factor while it's still around, um, and hang out there for a little bit. So I'll shoot limited and production for the next few years here.
What's your gun of preference?
So I shoot the Shadow 2s in production and then carry optics, and then the Tac Sport Orange in 40 is my limited gun. I've had a lot of luck with those. So
Have you
it's
seen the TS3?
I have. I've seen some rumors on
Ooh.
price point in the US. I'm kinda curious if it might threaten some of the 2011 boys out there.
Okay, man, that thing looks amazing. Not gonna lie. That'll
It
be
looks sick.
interesting. Yeah, I've
That's half
watched
the
a few
battle.
videos of it now. Yeah.
It feels
There's
cool.
it looks like there was a lot of thought. Well, one of the videos I saw was with the engineer who designed it. And he said, this design was a 2 to 3 year thing. It took them 2 to 3 years to get it all right, to get it the way they wanted. And it seemed like there were a lot of smart things. Everything's reversible. You can move everything from the left to the right if you're a lefty. It seems like a very smart gun. And man, it looks beautiful. And I'm not a CZ guy, but I'm not an anti CZ guy either. I'm just neutral, but it looked really nice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm curious if they'll make one in 40. Probably not. It's hard to get parts for the 40 cal tax board oranges as it is, so I can't imagine they'll make any
Mm,
more. The world as a whole is shifting away from major, and I
they
understand
are.
that, but
Yeah.
um, I enjoy it, man. The fireballs and the brass, the ejection pattern that comes out of that thing, it's just fun.
Well, when we had Phil on years ago, I think that was when Nils came in second at nationals and limited shooting a minor gun. And he's like, thank God Nils didn't win because my bosses would have told me to stop making everything in 40. And then like the next year he wins it in 9. So I'm like, that immediately came back to my mind. And I'm like, yeah, even the manufacturers are like, the demand for 40 guns has dropped off considerably. So it's getting to the point where it just doesn't make any economic sense to keep building them, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I enjoy it for the just the fun aspect of them, but
Right. Well, if the
and
FBI ever goes back to 40, then there will be an explosion in 40 again.
it'll be the new hotness. It's all cyclical, right? Eventually, we'll
It,
go back
it
to
is.
45s. We'll start shooting single stack again.
Right. All right. So I have a couple of specific questions. I know you guys talked about this a little bit on your podcast. So I'm going to ask you here, put you on the spot.
All right.
Squad shoot off or no squad shoot off at a major match?
Oh man. So in the like middle of the match, I don't love it. I do not like it.
Okay. Tell me why.
If it's not for score, I don't want to be thinking about it. If I'm in the match, being a competitor, doing my best to score well in this match, I don't want to be distracted by anything. I understand that I'm also kind of weird in that sense. I don't even like breaking for lunch, to be honest with you. So like,
I
and
get that.
just
Yeah.
anything that takes me away from being a competitor, getting to the next stage, getting the opportunity to express myself, like I'm not a super big fan. At the end of the match, if you want to do shoot offs, I think they're super cool. I think they're a ton of fun. I think they're fun little ways to unwind and have shooters compete head to head that may have be good shooters that may not have had the best match performance. But in the middle of the match, I'm not a big fan.
All right. I'm going to throw in a couple different perspectives. Are you a match director?
I'm not.
Okay. Thinking of from a match director perspective, and you know how at nationals you sometimes they'll have that stop where you're not shooting. It's not even lunch. It's just a stop in the middle of the match so you're in the vendor area.
Yep. Yep.
Now, what I like the idea of is when you get to that stop, have the squad shoot off because it's pretty quick. It's a short little thing. There's very little movement. So you're not like wearing yourself out or anything like that, but it's quick. And then you're in the middle of the vendor area too. So you're still doing some stuff. You're not using all of your time between stages. So you have time to spend at the vendor area. And I like so Jason Wood, the whole idea of the squad shoot off was when Jason Wood came up with the idea was uh, Max sat down and took all of the prize table stuff that they had. Now, he did say this was a pain in the butt. He said it was a lot of stuff I had to sift through, and I had to be on people's butts to get everything in early enough. But then he broke it down into however many squads, or let's just say there were 15 squads. He had 15 piles of prize table stuff for every single squad. So when you hit that and you did your squad shoot off, you also did your prize table right then. So there was none of that at the at you know what it's like at the end of nationals. I mean, it's 7, 8 o'clock, 8 o'clock by the time you are done with the award stuff. And then you have the prize table. And then well, I don't know, maybe it was different for winning C class. Maybe you got up there quicker.
I don't think I walked the prize table.
Okay. So you see what I mean?
Yep.
So the cool thing was, number one, everybody got a chance to do the shoot off. So they got to experience that instead of just watch people. And they had a good chance at a decent prize right there, like everybody did. So, let's just say, if the average prize table was $500, I'm just throwing out a random number, then there was enough stuff there for every single person in the squad. And depending on how you finished, determined, your pick of what was on the table. So I really liked that aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's very cool. I think that's a better way to distribute prizes, to give everybody an opportunity. It's something that's not another certificate for something they already own. Um, so there's like, I think there's better ways to do it than a shoot off. If I have to take a break, I don't hate it being a shoot off. My personal preference would be to not break, but if I have to take one
Right.
for match flow or whatever the justification for it is, like, oh no, I'll go shoot, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say if it was just like I never go to those vendor areas when there was a break at nationals. I just didn't do it.
Yeah.
I would go dry fire, I'd go to the bathroom, I'd go look at the next stage I was going to be shooting, whatever it was. You know what I mean? Like I didn't like messing up my match flow. But I would be okay if I was shooting another stage, even if it was just a shoot off, because I still feel like it keeps that momentum going.
Yep, yep, I can see that.
So, but I also understand because I think Dave had the same point of view you did, where it's like, no, it doesn't count for anything. Why am I doing it? Let's just keep moving. So I get that perspective too, but I still wanted to bring it up.
Absolutely.
Okay. I want to go. Now I'm going to have to put that picture back up on that other screen because we're going to go back to the other screen for a moment because there's something in. Oh, I have a question about this. I think this is interesting. So I want to ask. So for the people listening, I have thrown up your Instagram post about the science of competition class using data to drive performance. This is the one you talked about coming up in April at Bridgeville, Delaware.
Yes, yep.
Talk to me more about this. This is very interesting to me.
Yeah, so Dave and I were both instructors, and Dave works a lot with entry level people into shooting and then developing them into competitors. I work a lot with people who are already competitors who are looking to get better, and we sat down and we were like, "There's something missing here. There is something that young competitors are missing. They're getting discouraged. They feel like they're bashing their head into a wall. They don't understand why they're not getting better, why their match results aren't improving. They aren't practicing in meaningful or impactful ways. How can we as instructors help guide them to find the missing piece that we understand? And how do we articulate this missing piece? And so we found out through talking with some of our students, who had broken through the wall, who were A, moving into M class, who are now M class and pushing G, talking to them about like what really set the tone for you to consider yourself a high level competitor. What broke through that lower class wall for you? And for a lot of them, it was when we had talked to them about hit factor and points per second and what does that mean, right? And so a lot of people, when we talked to them, it was like 5 Charlie is a no shoot in points lost. Most people have never heard that in
Mm-hmm.
their entire lives. There is nobody, at least in our area, that is teaching that has a class that is structured
Mm.
about how do I apply hit factor math to a stage? What does a 10 hit factor stage mean? What does a 5 hit factor stage mean? Even if I can't control it, even if I am in mid B and I'm not pushing the same speed and the same hits as GMs, I can still make good decisions based on the stage and what I'm seeing within it. And so Dave and I sat down, we developed this class. We also developed the science of shooting, which is a more hard skill focused class focused on shot calling, transitions, reloads, the actual gun handling. Science of competition is focused very, very heavily in the hit factor and in the math behind it. and sort of pushing students on stages to make good decisions in real time.
Okay. I guess I have a couple questions here because I could see this being difficult to teach in that if you have D to M class shooters, it may be too basic for the M class and it may be too difficult for the D class to comprehend based on their varying degrees of shooting ability and understanding. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So who is this directed towards and how are you going to deal with those varying degrees of shooters?
No, that's a totally fair question. That's something that Dave and I have talked about as well. Um, Dave and I do not teach this class separately. We teach components of it separately on our own, but the science of competition as a full course, we only teach together to help mitigate some of that. We also do shooter profiles on everybody that we work with. So when you sign up with a class with
Mm,
us, you give us your name, your member number. You have to be classified in a shooting sport in order to take the class, just for safety prerequisites, just to make sure. We have made some exceptions for like very well established law enforcement and things like that. Um,
okay.
but you have to have some background in shooting
Gun
from a holster,
handling.
moving, gun handling.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so we create profiles on the shooters. We look at their most recent 5 matches. We take a breakdown of points lost per stage, percent of non alphas shot. We print that out. They get that as part of the class. And then when we're running short and medium courses, we run them in 2 separate groups. So we can provide different instruction based on what's going to be beneficial to the shooters who are shooting 35% non alphas or the shooters who are shooting 15% non alphas. And so we can have different conversations because for a lot of people, it's not necessarily how do I push a high hit factor? How do I win a stage? How do I process what a delta's worth in the middle of a stage? Like that's not beneficial. For a lot of them, it's the exposure to it in real time. It's the after run debrief of saying like, "Hey, you knew you shot that. You knew you hit that no shoot. You knew it was a mic. Like that is an automatic makeup. Like let's talk through that, and let's run it again." Right? That's the beauty of it being a class is we can hammer out the same sort of drill, we can hammer out the same sort of stage, and we can build repetition and we can run the numbers over sets and we can build an impression of what hit factor does to their score. And that's what this class is sort of built around is like how do I if you're a shooter coming into this, how do I understand hit factor and how it impacts me in a match? The science of competition, you'll walk away with a pretty good idea.
Interesting. I do think that I think you could make a better competitor at a lower classification level. But I think there are some people that just won't grasp it in any way until they become a higher classified shooter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, certainly. And there's this class does not teach that the hit fact understanding the hit factor math is the key to everything. Like if you lack the hard skills to execute on a stage, no amount of hit factor math will math your way out of bad shooting. Um, but what it will do is help give you the framework to guide your practice. It will provide you the context that you can then go and apply to your own journey. And you can say, okay, I shot this local match. This is what all of these numbers mean. We work with students fairly regularly. They don't know what points lost means. They don't know what average points lost is. They don't know what the percentage next to their name is in some cases. Um,
Mm,
Sometimes they don't know the point value of a delta or a no shoot. Um, and these are not brand new competitors. These are competitors who have been in multiple matches, and some of them over the course of a year that nobody's ever taken the time to explain. They haven't necessarily gone out and researched it. And there's a lot of people out there who are preaching that people don't need to know this at specific skill levels. And it is very, very possible to get caught up in the math and to think the math will save
right.
you from bad shooting. But it's also very important to understand the math because you can make a lot of good or better training decisions if you understand that we're scored in points per second. We are not scored in speed or accuracy.
Well, and I think here's what I didn't know for probably until my second full year of shooting, which was a miss isn't just you don't get the points. A miss is actually a penalty of 10 points. So there's more reason than just, oh, I don't have a hole in the target. I need to put one in the target. But it's also like, well, you technically you just lost 15 points off the top.
Yep.
So, it's like if your first shot is a miss, well, and there's 100 points total, well, you're at 85 now. Automatically. It's like, oh Lord. You know what
And
I
that
mean?
and that mic has a time attached to it. Like, there is a time
Yeah.
value.
Yeah. So it's, understanding that. So I think there are some basic things that could be explained so people become better competitors without having to know, okay, this is a 9.5 hit factor and I can push here and push there. You're not going to make Eric Grafels after one day, but I really like the concept of the class.
Yeah, appreciate it. It's something that Dave and I both feel is missing. Um,
Yes.
and not only is it missing in our opinion, there's people pushing against it. And I can understand there is a very valid reason to
Yes.
not want not lower level, that's the inaccurate term, but a younger
Lower
competitor.
classified shooters. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Yeah, a lower classified shooter, like, you're absolutely right. We don't need to dive into when to push, when to be conservative. Do you have the ability to make a route
Right.
here? We don't need to worry about that math. But what that shooter does need to understand is there are penalties for our actions. There are points that are earned on this stage. And if we don't impress the accurate math and how it's reflected in our score, it goes to them trying to interpret their scores on their own. And what we have found in our experience as instructors is those interpretations are inaccurate. They see an M class guy with two mics that beats them and they think speed's all that matters. It's like, well, that's not going to last you very long. You might get bumped to your next class with that mentality. That's not going to be a long term sustainable plan that's going to help you
Right.
through the duration of your career.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's when I saw that, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to ask him about this because I wasn't quite sure, but I'm like, especially when anytime I see using data to drive performance, I'm like, all right, I'm in already, but let me get more information because this goes right hand in hand with all my spreadsheets. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's get better by figuring out what good shooters are doing and how can we distill that.
well, and I think the other part of this too is again, you can impress certain things upon a newer shooter. Like, now, why did that just happen? Oh, no, we're good. That's so weird. Is that, um, okay, shooting on the move isn't just cool. When you break it down to points per second, here's why shooting on the move is necessary, you know?
Yep, absolutely. And then going on the going on that same train, right? Because everything we do is contextual. When is shooting on the move not okay, right? When is the risk incurred from that too great? And then you can apply your own skill set to those questions, but
Right.
asking those questions is important. Is this risk worth it? What is my reward here? Does the math make sense to try and do X, Y, or Z? And you can do that at every classification. That is not a GM only skill. That is something that you can do at any class in your practice, in your weekly match, that will make you a better competitor.
100%. So it'll be interesting. I'm going to have to check back in with you guys afterwards. I'm going to be curious. So I'm just going to reach out and ask, how it went. What do and then like maybe at the end of the shooting year, say, did you ever hear back from any of those guys? How did it help?
Yeah, well,
That
this is
type of thing.
we taught this class in October of last year, also in Bridgeville. Uh,
Okay.
and we had some pretty great feedback from some of our students that were able to apply what they had learned in their local matches. And I think our class average was B class in that. We had a couple of D's, we had one M who took the class. So it was a pretty wide variety of skill sets. But for a lot of them,
Right.
it was eye opening to get a stat sheet and say like, hey, you're shooting 60% alphas. and you're dropping an average of 7 Charlies a stage over your last 5 local matches, like, here's what that means. Like, if 7 Charlie a stage, you might as well take a miss on every single stage. Like, that's the negative impact that you're putting on yourself.
Right.
And a lot of them had never seen that, heard of that. They didn't even think about it that way.
Yeah, the first time I heard that put was Nil saying it to somebody at Nationals at CMP in 2021, where he's like, "You shoot enough Charlies, you shot a miss," and I was like, "What? Huh?" I was like, I started thinking about it. I was like, "Well, he's right. That is technically accurate because you look at the points. Yeah, he's right." That was the first time I heard it.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some things, and I really think for people, specifically for people who want to be like on a world shoot team, I think for guys who are getting more towards, the end of their career, maybe they were on the world shoot team at one time, maybe they were, national championship level, they've won several, but age catches up with everybody. It's the old saying, father time is undefeated. Um, I think there is enough people out there and enough demand that you could have one of these for people at the level of trying to get to a world shoot team, a world championship, a national championship. Maybe you're in the top 10 and you're trying to get to the top and you haven't quite figured it out. Being that best competitor you can be, whether it be and I think a combination of, how do you approach things mentally on a stage, and how do I strategize a stage based on points per second, you know?
Yep, absolutely.
But I like that you guys are, I think you're going to find just a what this is swag, scientific wild ass guess here. But I think you'll find that people will actually progress faster having a basic concept of the idea. Nothing too crazy in depth, but just a basic idea of like, oh, you shoot a mic, it's actually 15 points you're losing, not 5, little,
Mhm.
and explaining how that affects your score. It's like, okay, all right, this is good to know early.
Yeah, absolutely. And classification is a big focus for a lot of our students. We teach a good amount of private lessons to people who are like, I want to get, for some of them, into C class. For some of them, it's into B or into A. It's like, okay, let's take a look on what that takes, right? Let's look at your last 10 classifiers. Let's see what you shot, and let's see what it would have taken to get to that. Um, so let's break it down, because all of the beauty of the classification system, or if you want to call it beauty, like, those high hit factors are out there. The hard part's done for us. We know the high hit factor on the stage. We can work
Right.
backward into hard mechanical skills, and I can tell you exactly what your skill threshold needs to be on every single classifier. Um, and that's something that, like, most people don't consider. They have a goal. They say, I want to be B class. It's like, okay, let's let's work on the skills that are required to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So now I've mentioned it multiple times, but you guys, you, Dave, and Tom have a podcast called the Double Tap, or yeah, double, is that right?
The
Stage Brief.
stage
I'm
brief.
sorry,
Yep.
Stage Brief. I'm getting your company name confused with the podcast name. The
Yeah,
Stage Brief. How long have you guys been doing that?
we just released our 52nd episode this past week, so we are a year in. We do one episode a week, um, and it's been a crazy ride. We started it because we had some local guys who were like, "We love hearing you guys talk, like, at a match, like, just us amongst ourselves talking," and they were like, "This is good stuff." I'm like, "Oh, well, let's record it and put it on the internet then." And we've had such a blast with it. We get ourselves in a ton of trouble. We get to talk to each other. We give each other a hard time. There's a lot of growth and reflection that happens, like, even hosting it, right? I'm sure you're well aware, as a host of a podcast, like, you learn so much, just
Yeah.
by talking to people or talking through concepts and struggles you're having. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, yeah. How long do you guys plan on doing this until you get out of shooting, or what?
Yeah, absolutely. We have no plans to stop anytime soon.
Okay.
We cover a ton of topics, and the beauty of shooting is like you're never done. There's always something you're working on. There's always something you're experimenting with. There's always something going on in the community worth talking about. So we're gonna continue. We're gonna continue it as long as we can.
Okay. That's good. I mean, I don't know that it's like going to classes, you know. Some instructors resonate with you more than others. It's going to be like podcasts, you know what it's the same concept. Some podcasts will resonate with people more than others. You know, they can pick up different things on different podcasts. So I think it's good. So
Absolutely, and we can only do a couple hours a week, so there's enough podcasts out there for everybody to fill their week with some high level shooting knowledge.
absolutely. So is the Double Tap Shooting Academy what you guys do full time, or is this just a weekend side gig?
So it's a weekend side gig for now. Dave instructs full time as a private contractor for a local range. I manage a swim school, believe it or not. My professional career is in aquatics, and so it's separate. But I'm fortunate enough to have a flexible enough position that I get to sort of shoot as much as I want and do a ton of DTSA stuff as well.
Did you ever compete in swimming?
No, actually, my interest in swimming or in aquatics per se started from the safety side of it in lifeguarding.
Mm.
I worked at a summer camp that was specialized to work with kids that had incarcerated parents. And
Oh,
so we would bring them out. They'd have a week at summer camp away from whatever was going on in their personal life. And the waterfront almost got shut down because there was a shortage of lifeguards. And they asked if I'd be willing to go get lifeguard certified. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and that spiraled into a career in aquatics and the safety side of it.
spiraled into a career in aquatics.
Yep.
Okay. That's a funny way of putting it. I ask because before I ever went in the Marine Corps, I'm much older than you, Josh. I'm sure I went in the Marine Corps long before you were born, but I swam for 4 years on a summer team.
Okay.
So, and I was a lifeguard probably my last 2 years. So,
Yeah,
uh,
it's a fun job. It's never a dull moment.
and I tell you what, my worst experience was getting the tops of my feet sunburned. Man, that is terrible. Terrible.
I'm fortunate I
Holy.
work indoors, so I'm spared by that. But on the lakefront,
Ooh.
it was rough.
It was it was probably one of the hardest times I've ever had trying to sleep because it was just I'm a belly sleeper too, so trying to lay I had to stick my feet off the end of the bed so that they wouldn't touch anything. So, and I look, I am white. I am not a tanner. So, I my best tanning year I was probably a very light brown. Still nobody would have, confused me with anybody who was actually brown or olive or anything like that. They were like, no, that's a white guy pretending to be brown or olive. So, well, Josh, that was everything that I had. Was there anything you wanted to talk about before we go?
Yeah, I first off I want to give a couple of shout outs. Athena Precision, they make steel optics plates, magwells, things like that. They're a custom CNC shop. They've been a massive supporter of myself and Dave and the rest of the DTSA gang for this year. So they're phenomenal company. They run great optics plates for us. And so my dot guns all run them. The rest of the DTSA crews guns all run them. Phenomenal brand and super invested in helping shooters. So I can't give enough kudos to them. And then it's just I want to stress to everybody out there how important it is to make friends within the shooting community. Like the shooting is great, the competition is great, the ability to go out and express yourself and to do what you've been training so hard to do is such a good feeling, but the community is like what makes this so special. The friends you make along the way, the community that you build, is so hugely enriching, not just to your own life, but also to your performance as well. So there's a lot of people who have been massively impactful in my journey, and I can't be more grateful for them.
I totally concur with the making friends for sure. 100%. Well, Josh, I appreciate you coming on, and it was nice meeting you last year at Area 5.
Absolutely, absolutely. IPSC Nationals, I believe, but that's all right.
Oh, what? I keep getting those two matches confused because they were in the same place. So, yeah.
It was a pleasure
Someone
to
else,
meet
I
you.
was like, was it IPSC Nationals? I'm like, no, it's Area 5. This time I was like, oh, it's Area 5. No, it's IPSC Nationals. I'm just going to say Area 5, IPSC Nationals, one of the two.
You have a super fan in Tom Beck, and Tom Beck's one of the members of my community that I hold dear to my heart. So it was a pleasure meeting you as well.
Yes. And Tom is a good guy. So you guys have a good year. I wish you all luck and with both your shooting and your podcast and your training.
Absolutely, thank you, and I'll look forward to hearing more exciting stories from the casual shooter.
Appreciate it. You have a good night.